Good evening and most welcome to this evening's event. My name is Mattias Björnestedt and I'm chairman of the Swedish Tibet Committee. It's a great honor for all of us in the committee to welcome such distinguished guests to our country, namely 3 parliamentarians from the Tibetan parliament in exile. We have Yudon Aukatsang, Tenpa Yarpel, and Wangdue Dorjee. A warm welcome, please, if you can give them an applause. The struggle for the Tibetan people is and has always been a rough one and very frustrating in many ways. But I think all of us in the Tibet movement feel that recent developments have escalated those emotions quite dramatically. Namely, the massive use of boarding schools, colonial boarding schools in Tibet, where children are being basically forced away from their homes to go to schools far away and to study in a language that is not their own. So history repeats itself, and one naturally comes to think of other cultures that have suffered under similar circumstances. And it is for that reason that we have invited to this evening's debate. And we are honored to invite Inger Axiö Albinsson from the Sami Association of Stockholm. An applause, please. And Kurdo Baksi, representing the Kurdish people. Moderating and also main organizer of this tour through Europe is Vincent Metten, the EU Policy Director for Europe. And with him, he also has Melanie Blondell, who has been very active in organizing this. Thank you very much. So I'll be handing over to Vincent, and I'm looking forward to an interesting debate.
I would like first to thank Mattias and the Tibet-Swedish Committee for their great support and for helping us to prepare the visit and for hosting this event here in this Solidarity House. So please also applaud for Mattias' work and support. And I think for the Tibet movement, it's really important to have local Tibet support groups in different countries who are, there to help us and interfacing with, people here. And I think that's very useful and very helpful. I'm happy to have this event here today. It's an event that will focus on a discussion between our distinguished 3 speakers before giving the floor to them for a couple of minutes so they can each of them express their feelings, opinion, and position and situation of their respective community. I will first a little bit explain why the Tibetans are here in Europe today and give some quick background information. So the 3 distinguished and venerable members of the Tibetan Parliament in exile are visiting Europe. 4 countries are on their planning. We have already been to Czech Republic, Prague, which has been always very supportive on Tibet and on human rights. They have been to Lithuania, to Vilnius, and now they are going to, after Sweden, they will go to Holland. And there are reasons why we bring them in this and we propose them to visit these countries. Czech Republic, because it is holding the EU presidency, and we thought it was important to organize some official event. And there was one official event at the Senate, which was on the list of EU official agenda, which is on Tibet. It's not common. I've been working on Tibet for many years, and it's normally not the case. So this is very good. Lithuania, because they are also in the front line on China. They are quite outspoken on Taiwan, on human rights. the next, the Sweden, of course, because there is also an active support on human rights, and there will be the upcoming EU presidency next year. So we wanted to prepare ground for that also. And then Holland, we have the Netherlands, we have an office there, and they have also a good human rights policy. So we wanted also to pay a visit there. Some words about Tibetan Parliament in Exile. It's an institution that is composed of 45 members. So 3 of them are here today. Tempa Yapela, who is a monk, one of the schools that is represented here. Then we have Yudan Okatsang La, and our speaker who comes from Kham, from the eastern part of Tibet, Wangdue Dorjee, and he celebrates his birthday today. So I wanted to also to mention that. And so we have it's the Tibetan Parliament in Exile. It's an institution that was set up under the guidance of His Holiness Dalai Lama. When he flew in exile. He went into exile in India. He wanted to set up democratic institutions. And so he proposed to set up, different bodies. And the parliament is probably one of the main pillars of the institution in Exile. It's composed of 45 members who are directly elected by the Tibetan in Exile every 4 years. And this is the 17th Tibetan parliament in Exile which sits. We have different representatives with different mandate. Yudan is the 4th mandate, Tempara the 3rd, and your 1st mandate. So, and each 30 members are represented from each main region of Tibet, Utsang, Amdo, and Kham. Then we have the representative of the 4 Tibetan Buddhist school, and then we have members for Europe, for the US, and for Asia as well, and Australia. So it makes 45 members together. You have had the visit of Tempa Tsering recently, what we call the Sikyong, the head of the Tibetan administration and government in exile, who was also in Sweden. He's another figure of the Tibet central administration. So I think this complete is additional to his visit, and we are happy to be here today. This being said, for today's discussion, we could ask each of us, why are we gathering representatives of Kurds, Tibetans, and Sami together? They are from 3 different continents. They have 3 very different history. They don't have the same size, from a couple of thousand to 6 million to 45 million. You have some movement that are only under occupation of one country, under China. This is Tibet. We have the Sami and the Kurds are spread in 4 different countries, each of them. So it's very distinct history and background. But nevertheless, there are obvious common points and obvious similarities. And I think one of them is first that there is a clear sense of identity and of community. Each of them have the feeling, I think each Sami, each Kurd, each Tibetan have the feeling to be member of a group, of a community, and have a strong national identity. This is, I think, very obvious today. Because they are 3 old civilizations, very old history. And this, I think, has to be also kept in mind. Due to history, the people were split and were, separated, and had to be confronted with different nations and states, which very much attacked their identity and their culture. And I think this has very much impacted these 3 communities. It has been very impactful of their language, of their culture, of their tradition, of their way of lives. And I think this is a common similarities that they all have. And in front of this, I think history, they have resisted and they have expressed their resilience, that they don't accept that and they want to protect their identity and culture. So this is, I think, a common point that you certainly have. And I think based on this, I would like to give to each of you respectively the floor. Because I will start with you if you agree, and then we have the representative of the Kurdish community, and then our Tibetan friend. So, I mean, for a few minutes, just feel free to speak.
So it's interesting and fruitful to be here today. We have different histories as people. And maybe some of you don't know much about the Sami people, and not in Tibet maybe, and not even Sweden. The Swedish people do know a lot. There are 5 minorities in Sweden, and the Sami is one of the minority, but we are also indigenous people. So that is a little bit different. So we have other rights, theoretically wise. As you said, we have from the beginning what we call Sapmi is 4 different countries. And we have also we have the Sami language, but there are about 4 or 5 different variations of that. So once upon a time, we were more of a nomadic people, wild reindeer from the beginning, and then husbandry of reindeers. But we were moving freely. There were no boundaries, so that was very important. But then there was a lot of legislation from Swedish government, from Norwegian government, etc., to say, oh, you can't go there because you can't do this, etc. So, and we once upon a time had more of a nature-based religion, and we had even the Noids, the shamans of our time. The colonization, you could say, started rather early in the 11th centuries, mainly by the church from the beginning, the Catholic Church, and then the Lutheran Church. And one of the issues was to sort of forbid us to have our nature religion. And so they burnt the drums, and some of the people that were shamans were killed, etc. And they started this sort of re-education to be Swedish. But the church was not the only one. The church was just working for the state, because the state was very interested in all the natural resources that were up in the northern part of Sweden. And that is also the biggest threat we have today, what is called grön omställning, green transition. That is nothing else than a modern colonization. Because what's happening with the mines and with all the windcraft that you don't want to have in Sandhamn with the sailing boats, want to have them up there somewhere, is that they're taking the land from us. The land that we don't own, but we have the right to the land to use it since immemorial time. But that is something that is sort of not talked so much about. So, and the boarding school, that is also have been a problem very much. Many of our ancestors went to school, and they were not allowed to speak their language. They get punished when they did it. And that's a good way to colonize people. You don't have your language. So many of our ancestors, grandmothers, etc., they don't speak the language. So we have to do it when we get older and sort of retake our language to have it. Of course, there are some changes. In '93, the Sami parliament was introduced in Sweden, but this is not the same parliament as in Norway, for example. It's just giving advice to the government, so they don't have that much power. And what else? We have not signed the ILO Convention 169 on indigenous rights for people. And that's because the government doesn't want that, because then the question of the natural resources, all the electricity of the middle of Sweden and southern Sweden comes from the north, so it's easy to dam, etc. And of course, most Sami people in Sweden are not having reindeers, but the reindeer is still a culture bearer of our tradition. So if that is erased, many of our culture values will be erased as well. So you talking about UN, every year they come here and every second or third year or something and write, and we never get accepted, but the government doesn't give much. They don't bother about that question. This year has also started a so-called Truth Commission It's not the same exactly as in Australia and Canada, because there is no reconciliation talked about. But it's starting now to look at the misdeeds, what have been happening from the state towards people. But the problem is not, culture is okay. I mean, they like our exotic way of singing and being clothes, etc. So that's not the important thing. Language and the green transition, these are the threats for our future as a people. Thank you.
I really hear so much similarities with what is happening in Tibet also. You will certainly speak about it, but you could replace Sami by Tibetans. It will be very applicable about the environment, threat to the environment, and Tibetans being out of the decision-making processes, using green languages or pretext to continue modern, policy that are disrespectful of local communities and of nomads and not paying respect to their way of life and traditions. The problem with language, as Matthias mentioned, with the Chinese boarding schools and so on. I would like now to pass the floor to Mr. Kurdo Baksi also, and to hear from you your latest update on the situation.
I hope my voice will be enough. I have given many seminars today, so we will see. Thank you very much. You can buy a house, but you cannot buy a home. It's very different, because you can, the home is your language. If somebody destroy your language, then you don't have a home. So it's very important, because the house, you can just have 4 walls, and then you have a house, a little door. It's technically, physically not a big deal. Everybody can do it. It can be a nice house, it can be a bad house. But the language is your home. And it's very interesting that nobody say in the international protocols father language, but they say mother language. The mother, Swedish, I don't know how we say it, modersmål in English. Do we say some? Mother tongue? They don't say father tongue. And this is also very interesting, because the language belongs to the mother, and the mother is the soil and the Kurdish territory. In this case, you can also see that maybe for many of people, they are speaking about the revolution, the protest in Iran now. But for me, the most interesting thing was that the first girl who was killed by this called moral police, her name was Gina in Kurdish. She was a Kurdish girl, and I know exactly which family it is, and so, And when the father and mother went to the authorities to register her name, they didn't accept to write Gina. They said it's not a language, it's not a Kurdish, no, it must be Mahsan. We gave her the name. And the family fought very much, they do everything. They tried to pay money to some officer, some military, some others, but they couldn't manage it. So that's why you can see also how the name, a question of the name is very important. I am the only one in Turkey, we are 25 million Kurds, whose name is Kurdo, and they are trying to do everything to stop this name. So if you say Kurdo in Turkey, everybody know me, because not I'm an intelligent guy, because of my name. It's so Kurdish you can be. So this means that the name, so it's very important for me. The Kurds, they live between Iran, they live in Iran, in Iraq, in Turkey and Syria. And they are approximately 45,000. Turkey became a republic the summer of 1923. Next year, they will celebrate 100 jubilee of oppression, discrimination. And in the 3rd of March, 1924, Turkey made a constitution. And in the beginning paragraphs, they write that there is only the Turkish language will be used in the court, in the school, everywhere. And 8 years later, now you must listen very carefully, maybe my English will not be so perfect, but listen carefully. 8 years later after the Republic, they had a law that if somebody say a Kurdish word, then the family must pay money for every word you use in Kurdish. So my grandfather's father was a rich man. So he said, and the soldiers were around, and they would say, I pay now for 1 week. I like to speak in Kurdish. So he paid money before he will make his speech, and said, I can buy you, and I will pay for it. And so you understand that my position, my relation to my home, to my language, is very, very special, because the language, the Kurdish language has been so questioned and discriminated. So they say in the Turkish constitution, they write that later they say that the ministers and the prime minister that there is no Kurdish language. The problem is that the Kurdish language has 93,000 words and the Turkish language has 22,000 words. So, but we don't exist. So whatever we do, we don't exist. And these 22,000 of Turkish words, 30% Arabic, 30% Persian, 10% Kurdish, and a few words come and go and close the door is in Turkish. It's not so much the Turkish words, actually. And I also, in the Turkish language, they have loaned the words from other languages. But they say this is the Turkish language, and they make everything. So, but the Kurds, we have three big problems since 1923. One, the Kurdish language has been forbidden everywhere, in the hospital, in the court. Sometimes they have accepted a few days, but the Kurds have tried to accept that. Now when in the Turkish parliament, we have 75,000 with the Kurdish backgrounds. Many of them my friends. I'm in this, between 50 and 60, so I have important friends now in my age. So these guys and women, when they speak in Kurdish, because they like to irritate Erdogan, so they write in the protocol a non-existent language. All the Turkish parliament, non-existent language, non-existent language. And in Turkey, if you are a woman and they beat you, somebody, you can call in English, in Arabic, in Spanish, in French, in Turkish, but not in Kurdish. And in Chinese, you can call. We will get help. If you call in Chinese and say, I'm beaten by my husband, this is a special service. But 25 million of the Kurds in Turkey cannot have this help. So you understand that. So the language is the other one is the songs and the music and the culture. So Turkish government has done everything to stop these thousands and thousands of the Kurdish songs. So they they take the music, they sing it in Turkish with the Kurdish music, and they take our words, but we don't exist. And even whispering in Kurdish people has been sitting in prison 5-6 years just because somebody said that he was whispering in Kurdish on the street. So this hate to the language is I haven't seen it anywhere because I don't like there is no competition between the oppressed people. I don't say that my oppression is bigger than your oppression, or I have suffered this, I don't accept it. But the situation for this, the other thing is that also archaeological genocide in Kurdistan. I don't know how can I say it. Is that the Turkish government tried to destroy every stone which will give the Kurds a history, a proudness. So you have Hasan Cave as a in the Batman. So they make water places and they destroy and destroy. So every paper about the existence of the Kurds, they don't accept it. And it is very, very strange because when it was Ottoman Empire, everybody knows what is Ottoman Empire here. It was not like that. The Kurds, they decided over everything, but they have just to pay taxes and send 1,000 of soldiers every month to the capital or something like this. It was all. And the interesting thing is that between 1079, when the Ottoman Empire starts, until 1923, when the Sultan, the emperor, will be crowned. So he stays like this, and they have a big text like this in Arabic letters, and say, me, from today at 9 o'clock, I will be the emperor from Kurdistan to Hungary. Did you hear? He said Kurdistan. He didn't say Turkey. This is very interesting. So how could a state decide just to try to eliminate a nation? So when I was a little boy, when I heard about Tibet, it was the language, and I get a lot of support for them. And of course, I liked the Dalai Lama very much. He was a kind of a symbol for me, and so. But when I heard some people tell me about the Chinese, how the Chinese authorities do, and now I have seen the last month that about a singer in Tibet who burnt himself, and I have seen these. So the Kurds, we feel very much. I write in Facebook today. Every Kurd is a Tibetan and Sami. Every Sami is a Tibetan and a Kurd. And of course, so because we have, and we can say, what I can say is that, of course, the Kurds, our country is divided by 4 countries. But there is no difference between the Chinese and Turkish mentality about the other people. And one thing more, the Kurds, the Sami, and Tibetan, we are not minorities because we lived in this area before the other came. They are minorities. We are not minority because the Kurds have been living in the same area 5,000 years. So the other people has come there. Tibetan has been living there for 1,000 and 1,000 years. Chinese are the minority. And Swedish people are minority because they have stolen this territory of the Sami. So it's also important to, just for our self-confidence, to say that we are not a minority. We have never been a minority because we are a nation. A nation, if Vatican, there are 380 persons, I think. How many are there? I don't know. If they can call them a nation, why can we not call us a nation? We are not minority. We are a nation, and we must stop this genocide in Tibet and in Kurdistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with your...
Sorry, I become emotional.
No, it's fine. I think the fact that you said we shouldn't use the word minority for depicting or speaking about your group of people, and I think it's completely right.
We are not minority in our territory.
Exactly, and this is a narrative that is officially used to try to legitimate the control that you have over a population. And sometimes when I have meetings in Brussels, I tell EU officials, if Russia had been successful in controlling Ukraine, and if Russia would have called Ukrainian a minority, I don't think Ukrainian would be very happy of that, And this speaks to EU leaders, and they understand, okay. So this is also what we are trying to ask foreign governments. Don't use the word minority when you speak about Tibetans. This is not helpful because...
This is not correct.
Yeah, this is not correct. And also in terms of international law, you have less weight and less right if you are a minority than if you are a people or just Kurds or Sami or Tibetans. And I also echo your language issue. I think this is very common to the 3 groups and 3 communities. Because why? Because language is your relation to the world. It's your relation to your history. And if you try to change and attack the language, it's also attack the identity of people and how you perceive the word and how the culture is transmitted from one generation to one generation. And the leaders of the 3 countries that they are concerned here, they know that very well. So I would like to pass now the floor to Wangdue Dorjee for your some remarks on Tibetan issue, please.
Tashi Delegate, warm greetings to all, and I would really like to thank the organizers, International Campaign for Tibet and Swedish Tibet Support Group for organizing this really important event on behalf of Tibetan Parliament in Exile. So I'm really honored to represent Tibetan Parliament in Exile and our Tibetan 6 million, So today, like sitting here, and talking about Tibet. Seriously, like I really want to, as a representative, we had been really working hard under the leadership of His Holiness for our Tibetan cause for more than like 70 years. And we have been really like urging the world to really not to accept the China's one China policy, but at the same time, Tibet was an independent nation and Tibet is not a part of China. It was illegally and brutally occupied by colonial empire in 1950s. So today, I want to talk a little bit about His Holiness and Tibetan struggle of 70 plus years. So as for Tibetans, it was in the year 1949 when Chinese army really illegally entered Tibet. So just after a year, it was His Holiness the Dalai Lama who was really he was he was compelled to take the responsibility at a very young age of 16. But then the fight with the Chinese army and the struggle, like in the year 1959, His Holiness the Dalai Lama had to really escape and flee to India and take refuge out there. He was followed by more than 80,000 Tibetan brothers and sisters. And in the same year, Chinese invaded Tibet. So like the way Vincent explained about the Tibetan parliament in exile, how important it is. So it was His Holiness the Dalai Lama's vision, to form the Tibetan government in exile, mainly to preserve and to keep the freedom movements alive, and mainly to preserve and protect our language, for a long term, for the future. Because in exile, anything can happen, especially in China under the occupation, things are not really easy. So in exile, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, under the Tibetan government in exile, he formed Tibetan settlement. He formed Tibetan schools where Tibetan children were taught not only the modern education, but at the same time, he wanted to preserve the centuries-old Tibetan culture and tradition, and more importantly, Tibetan language, which he really thought is the source of one's identity. So to preserve and save the Tibetans' identity, he had a vision just after coming to exile in 1959, and then he formed a proper democratic exile Tibetan government, Tibetan parliament, and he set up a whole Tibetan community in exile. So on top of that, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he has not only been working for the Tibetan cause, but at the same time, at present, the whole world knows about His Holiness the Dalai Lama because he has been, epitome or the ambassador of peace and compassion. He wanted peace in the whole world. And at the same time, he has been working on the interfaith religious harmony also. So along with him, His Holiness, our Tibetan living in exile, especially our Tibetan government in exile, which is now known as Central Tibetan Administration, and Tibetan Parliament in exile, we have been reaching out to governments, we have been reaching out to legislators, civil societies, and individuals, especially to get more support, and at the same time trying to create the awareness about the critical situation, what is happening inside Tibet under the colonial empire, the regime, who is trying their level best to really destroy and dissolve the Tibetans' identity. For us, all of us, that is the main issue, our identity. So China is not only trying to exploiting our minerals. China has been exploiting our water resources, our forest resources, and then they are trying to population transfer is happening on, and then education and economic marginalization is happening on. But moreover, China, their intention is to eradicate and eliminate the Tibetan civilization, the centuries-old Tibetan race. They are trying to eliminate that Tibetan identity from this beautiful world. But then, me being a Tibetan, born in exile, But like, I have heard the stories from my late father, like how they fought against the Chinese regime, especially from 1949 to 1959. More than a millions of Tibetans, they fought to, protect our nation. They have fought to protect their brothers and sisters, especially like my grandfather. He fought, and then he was tortured and murdered, and especially in the prison. And then my aunt, my eldest aunt, again, she was also tortured, raped, and starved to death in the prison. Like my family, like the stories, in every Tibetan's family, we have such stories. But then, if we see the United Nations record, there is a record of 10th March of 1959, which says 80,000 Tibetans has been massacred in the uprising day. But then, more than 1 million Tibetans, it has been like, brutally murdered by the Chinese authority army. Not only during the invasion, but during the Cultural Revolution also, they have tried their level best, to destroy our main pillar of Tibet, that is our religion, Tibetan Buddhism. But then our great masters, they have revived everything. So, like in Tibet, to fight against the Chinese repressive policy, Chinese communism, especially our brothers and sisters inside Tibet, they have really been doing the supreme sacrifices, especially like everyone knows these days, since from 2009, like more than 150 plus Tibetans, they have self-immolated, like the way you were saying about the singer, Tsewang Nurbu. He is young. Like most of the Tibetans who have self-immolated, they are below 35 years of age, who have never seen independent Tibet, who have never seen His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But then, like, they wanted, they know what is happening inside Tibet, and they know the value of His Holiness, they know the value of freedom. And Tsewang Nurbu, the singer, like he was doing very good. Like he was a famous singer, not only in Tibet, but in China also. He set himself on fire. So like him, most of the self-immolators, they were below 35 years of age. So which is really, being a Tibetan, I feel really sad because our population is nearly 6 million. One Tibetan, is really precious for us. But then sacrificing for the Tibetan cause, it really, gives you confidence, and it really gives you positive feeling that, okay, we are still, we are still alive, our struggle is still alive. Even if we are in exile, even if His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he is like now pretty old, he is 86. But then we feel that it is our responsibility, it is our time to work and to fight for our cause. So then, like, I really don't want to take much of the time. It's just that I'm really honored, I want to say, I'm really honored to be here talking and representing not only the Tibetan in exile, but at the same time, Tibetans who are voiceless inside Tibet. Like the way you said, we all are one, you are connecting, all of us. I really feel the connection of humanity. Like the way His Holiness always say, we all are human beings. So, like, taking this opportunity, I really want to thank the organizer for organizing such an important event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wangdue. I think now we can enter into exchange of views, question and answer session. So if you have anything you would like to comment, to raise, please feel free. I will perhaps start with a first question, and then you have time to think about it. I'll break the ice. Perhaps as a reaction to Wangdue's expression about speaking about self-immolation, which is a sort of not new since 2009, a political protest. It's the biggest wave of self-immolation with political objective, is to denounce policies of the Chinese policies in Tibet and to ask the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet. Are they for the Samis and for the Kurds also, not this type of action, but other ways that the younger generation are resisting? Are there, what is the mindset and the spirit of the younger generation of your community? Is it also this feeling to struggle is strong as they expressing new ideas, new ways to defend their people and their rights. Maybe if you want to start.
Yes, I'm thinking about the way to sort of get out of this thing we are into. And what is so important is the cooperation, for example, a cooperation like this. And we have a lot of cooperation, not like the Stockholm Sami Association, but all the Sami associations in Sweden with other First Nations, like Canada, like Australia, like New Zealand. And we're sort of making network international the way you do in a way. And that is so helpful. And I can tell you a couple of weeks ago, maybe months, there was a conference on water here in Stockholm, but we were not as a people invited by the Swedish government, but by the Australian embassy. So we have yes, that is so embarrassing for the Swedish government, but they don't feel that. So we have a lot of leverage effect here in Stockholm, especially since we have a big Sami community, by working together with the Canadians and the Australian and the New Zealand, because we have a lot of things in common. So with something happening in Australia, we can take it back and say they are trying to make member of parliament, because we don't have any party in the normal parliament that is speaking up for the Sami rights. So we learn by meeting other people from other countries and within the country to cooperate that way. And that is so important, the way you're doing too, that you're touring and telling about what's happening. And by knowing there are several, because you have to work so much harder, I think, on the UN thing. If they come here every second, third, fourth year and say, you have not complied, and the Swedish government says, so what? And nothing happens. It's so embarrassing. And Sweden, I've been working in development business before, so I know well, Sweden is such a do-good country somewhere else in the world. But not here, because here we have something to lose. Money talks, natural resources, etc. But we're somewhere else, in Nicaragua or somewhere else, that is much easier to be good there. So.
Yes, sir, Baksi.
Yeah, your question was about the resistance form or cooperating.
Are there new ways? How is the younger generation also resisting? Are they struggling in different ways? Are you using also international cooperation as an example, or other ways?
Yes. Yeah. No, thank you. Yes. Well, I just like to say that before I forget, because I decided to say it this morning at home, that we need help for somebody who is observer in UN. I don't know if Tibet, do you have observer in UN, United Nations?
They don't.
You don't have? Diakonia has, but we don't have. Okay. And this question is very important, that the stateless people without country, that they should work for have a observer. It will be very good for to follow China, to follow Turkey, to follow other countries, because we tried many years. I mean, we are in television, so I cannot say everything today. But this thing is very important to have to find a country who will help you to cooperate and give you information, and we have to learn us, because it's very important also for this for our network, but also for in the coming years when we have a free country, then we have many things ready. I mean, it's very important. So in Iraq we have the Kurds, we have federal Iraqi Kurdistan. So it's federal and it's by the constitution accepted. So we have a lot of easier things to do than before, so we are in the 4 parts. But now the war is not in the demonstrations on the street. It's much more. It is social media. So we have a lot of events in Facebook, and we are trying to. I mean, a certain day, for instance, we can find a day for Samis, important day, or 10th of March for Tibetans. Then the Kurds will go out and write something in Twitter, the leaders say will something, or making some trips together, because of Corona we have been a little bit out of our normal life. But we are. I hope after New Year we will be much more inactive. So it would be that the Tibetans can visit each other, come to Kurdistan or to Sami land. It's also very important. But also the problem is that now I just speak about that we have about 3 million Kurds maybe in Europe. Of course, this is a very high number, and it means that many of the Kurds are European citizens. They have Finnish passport, Spanish passport, they have many other things. But many of them, they don't speak their language, and this is very difficult for us to educate the people, because the language is very important to get information, but also to have an internal relation. So we would appreciate. So we have now in the websites we have the Kurdish dictionary in many languages, so the young generation can learn the language. The other thing is that we try to send them to Kurdistan 1, 2, 3 months or something like this. But now Turkey attacking Iraq and Syria, so we have our many problems. We cannot send young children to this area. This is also a terrible thing. So and as you know, we have the other thing. The Kurds, we have another problem, that we have 3 alphabets. We have Latin, we have Arabic, and Cyrillic. So because they are Kurds in Soviet, Stalin didn't let them to write in our alphabet. So they started an alphabet, the Cyrillic. And the Turkish government, they want to have, they have the Latin alphabet, and in Syria also, but Iran, Iraq is the Arabic alphabet. So which means that many Kurds, they cannot read each other's articles and texts. So by the voice, yes, we can have good relation. So we also, it's also, you are lucky that you have one alphabet in Tibetan, I think. So this is also our problems. But what we can do is also that together make, we can say every nation has different level of lobbyism in certain countries. Let me say that that if maybe Kurds are very strong in Sweden or France, so maybe we can make relations so they can help maybe Tibetan. And Tibetan are very strong maybe in Lithuania now. I don't know. I am just speaking now. So then we could help. They could help us there. So we can find some methods to maybe Kurds have better relations with journalists in Sweden. Then we should have. For instance, I try always to help Tibet here as a Kurd. So it's the Olympic Games, and so we try to use these, these things. So we can also that on the. I think also it would be very nice. I have a dream, and I didn't have time to make my dream. If I had time, I will make it. Also, that they make a small book in English about Tibetans, Kurds, and other peoples without a country. And then try to let somebody from every nation write a chapter, and then we can sell to everybody, and then it will also make a kind of relations between the Kurds and Sami and others, and then it will be, I think it will also give publicity in one way. So this is but the new generation, you are just 6 million, you are not so many. But you must take care of your language, because without language, everything will be just, finished. Because this is the most important thing, that the Tibetan language will never die. So now, because thank you to internet. Normally, before I said always to the Kurdish leaders when we have seminars for them, I say that God has created internet for Kurds. Because if the internet and satellite televisions didn't exist, the Kurdish language maybe will die. So I joke all the time to the Kurdish leaders, say that you must every day pray for internet, not for the other things. So because of the internet, now we have about everyday newspapers in Kurdish, and everybody can read it very easily in the sofa, half an hour, 15 minutes. And we have also a lot of TV channels by internet, in internet. So it has really saved the Kurdish language. So I hope also the other can. So we have different situations. For instance, I think in Turkey we don't have normal Kurdish programs, but in Iraq we have. So we look at them. So they pay the money and we make the program between us. I mean, so it's a kind of, so always to find a solution to, because they have oil, very much oil in Iraq, so they are rich. So they have akurs under the table in other parts. So it's always, you have to find the solutions, but the language, everything should be for your language.
As you said, it's for us also, like it was in my presentation or before I just said that it was His Holiness' vision, you know, that one's identity is based on the language, like the way you, like with your experience, you said. So because of his vision, you know, in exile, though Tibetan whole population is 6 million, but in exile our population is merely, you know, 125,000, 125,000 only. It is nothing. But then, because of his vision, because of his hard work, we have been able to, you know, preserve not only our tradition, culture, but at the same time, you know, our identity with our language. So in Tibet, in Tibet, China, the communist regime, they have tried their level best to eradicate the Tibetan identity, you know, from the root with their force during the Cultural Revolution and with the economic development. But they realize, but now they know that, okay, they can't, they are not able to do it because Tibetan root is like, it's so strong, connected with the religion and especially with the language. Yes. So because of which, before Vincent said about the colonial boarding school. So now they are coming up with a colonial boarding school, which is so strong, they're implementing that from above 5 years of age, you know, they are taking away every kid to the colonial boarding school to eradicate the, you know, the Tibetan language from the root. Yeah. So, which is really, really important and which is, you know, like preserving language is very important for one's identity. Yeah.
I just like to say something funny also, because we just speak about very sad subject. So in the 30s, 100,000 Turks, they were exported to Kurdish areas to speak Turkish with the Kurds. So after 20 years, the president of Turkey, İsmet İnönü, he came and said on the station that what happened to the Turkish military service, Turkish general, what happened with these, do the Kurds speak good Turkish now? He was a very short and very ugly man, I remember him, and his son also. And then the general said, I'm sorry, Mr. President, now all the Turks speaking Kurdish now. Not single Kurd speak Turkish. So it can be also interesting to just, you know, a real story on the train station. It was a very, very famous speech in Turkish history. So you can also, so the language is power. Yeah. So, and another thing, what is sometimes bad habits are good habits. Because in the 50s, the Turkish state started to put the Kurdish children in boarding school. It was always right. But the Kurds, they don't like have their daughters in school. So they were paying money under the table to the teacher and everybody. And of course, my family were very modern. The daughters must go to the school and so. But 99% didn't go. And the Kurdish language also survived because of this bad habit we have in the Kurdish culture.
I was thinking about something about, not about language, maybe also that's important to take back your language, and that's what a lot of us are doing in adult time, and sort of making the language seen. Usually, you introduced me now, but sometimes when we meet people like this, I always make 2 or 3 phrases in South Sami. Nobody will understand, but it doesn't matter. Then I translate to Swedish or English, just to make your language seen. And that is also the same thing, but with our cults. You know, sometimes when you go on the street, people say, "Oh, what is this? Oh, you lop, you have," things like that. But it's important to say, yes, this is, you know, we came before you sometimes, if you feel a little bit like
we are not minority.
No, but no, exactly, that's a good thing too. But something, I'm talking about amnesty. We have, for example, in Sweden now a division of amnesty called Amnesty Sapmi, and they are speaking up for a lot of things. You know, there are things about the Biological Institute in Sweden that was 100 years just this year, and there are questions about all the relics of skeletons and heads without names, and sometimes with names at our hospitals and museums, and all are objects that were stolen by the government and put in all Nordiska museums and different places. We want to take them back where they should go home, you know, sort of. So there are a lot of things, and I think these things, maybe not like the political things in the 70s, etc., but this is a lot of things that interest younger people. So also taking back your cult and your language. And of course, it's, you know, it's difficult when you're a little bit older to start from the beginning, but we do it, you know. And internet has been very helpful in that context with the language.
Thank you. I think it's also important what you raise about the need of cooperation between groups. I think that's really an avenue that we have to continue to build on. Also for the cooperation, I would think also in China with the Uyghurs, with the Hong Kongers, with the Southern Mongolians, that also are communities that we try to cooperate when we can in Brussels and other cities to organize joint demonstration and event and so on. That's very important. But I agree with internationally. I mean, there could.
I just like to thank you, Matthias, here, the Vice President. He has done many international meetings at the outside of the parliament with the Mongolian, with the Uyghurs, with the other people. So we are. Thank you very much. It has been a great.
So please, I'll give you the microphone, please, for the record of the song.
In Exile and also inside Tibet, we have, I think the artists have played a very big role in keeping our language alive, our culture alive. So we have very important artists inside Tibet who are loved by people in Tibet and outside Tibet. We have artists in exile who are also kind of loved by younger generation. So they also keep our culture alive, which is, I don't know about your cultures, whether you have, I'm sure you do, but I haven't heard about it. So there was one question of whether you have a vibrant artist community or not in Sami and in Kurdish. The other thing I wanted to ask was, I know I've read a little bit about Sami, about your parliament. So we are parliamentarians, 3 of us, So you have a Sami parliament. I've heard about it. And is it only in Sweden or is it like like Scandinavian? Because I know the Sami people are in Finland, in Norway, right? So do you have a parliament that is crossing all 3 countries? And Kurdish parliament, you said a little bit about it. So it'll be interesting because I think, how do you keep your work going, I think the parliament is one of them, right? I think that's enough. And also the recent apology from the church, did that help in your cause of the Truth Commission? You said has said, but there's no reconciliation. So what would be a reconciliation for you? Would be interesting, for me.
Very shortly, the parliament, the Sami parliament in Sweden is just for Sweden. And it's just 31 members of parliament. And they are a governmental agency and the parliament. So they don't have that much power. They just advise the government. That is, the government decides, for example, for a mine in Gallok. the government decides so. But the parliament in Norway is a little bit stronger, and I don't know so much about the parliament in Finland, but so this is different. And when I met the Australian ambassador, he asked me which party in the parliament, the normal parliament, is supporting you. I said, no party. Maybe some individuals from the Green Party, some of them, but just as individuals might, not always, take up the question, because some people don't want to be Sami. They want even, they want to be Swedish, so it's much easier in many ways. Sorry, what's the other question?
Artist community.
Yes, we have a very strong artist community nowadays, and that is sort of over the whole Sapmi. Music, a lot of rap music, a lot of modern music, and modern music mixed with the traditional joik, which is a little bit like you were, singing up here. So it's a theater and a lot of books. We have a lot of books that have got good prizes, and that is rather strong for the majority. And say, wasn't that Sami or something? And most people in Sweden don't know so much about Sami conditions and all these things. That's why every time you have the chance to meet people, you will always try to educate people, sort of, or telling the story just to say, did you know that we don't even have the right for our children's children to have Sami language in preschool, etc. And did you know that we can't do this? And did you know that we didn't do the ILO convention, we didn't ratify that, etc. And people sometimes say, oh, let's talk about Nicaragua or something else.
Yeah.
On your parliament, you wanted to say a few words.
In Iraqi Kurdistan, we control 50,000 square kilometers. So, and in this area, we have a parliament with 111 members of the parliament, and because we are majority, so we have given 11 parliaments places to the minorities in Kurdistan. So we call them others minorities. So Arabs, Christians, like Chaldees, Mandes, they are Assyrian, you know them, Assyria, yes. Armenian, maybe one. I think he was killed. I don't remember now. Maybe he's not alive. But one Armenian last time, and then you have also Turkoman. And the Turkish government says that we oppress the Turks in Iraqi Kurdistan, but we have given them a seat in the parliament. So it's also interesting. And the music is very, the biggest Kurdish artists, they live very much in diaspora. So we have, this is very important for us. So every month almost, they have a kind of concerts in Sweden. And Sweden is very important in the Kurdish, for the Kurdish language, because we have in the literature, we call them for Stockholm School in the literature, because maybe 200 Kurdish writers are living in Stockholm, in Sweden. And also I like to say that the Kurdish, just give you an imagination, between 1923 and 1980, it was published 4 books in Kurdish, secretly in Turkey. Most of them, my family published them, I think. And in Sweden, in the same time, 2,500 books. So we love Sweden in one way for our language. But now how they have treated Sami is something else. But also this is also very important to say that they give so much help to the other languages. They should help much more your language, because you are the owner of the house. Yeah. Reconciliation, yeah.
Yes, well, the Truth Commission has just started, and it's to look at the misdeeds of the government towards the Sami people, government and church. So it hasn't really, but it's just called the Truth Commission, because in Canada, for example, it was called the Truth and Reconciliation. So we wait for the reconciliation to happen afterwards. But of course, it's good with the excuses from the church, and that is touching. It is really, even if you're not very, going to church, etc. But the interesting part is what will be the changes. And for the church, for example, 200 years ago, joik was forbidden the way we sing, or sing, well, you know, this special way. But nowadays you can even joik in churches. So there is, you know, small changes. But what will happen after this Truth Commission is the important thing about the language, about the green transition in the north, and about other things.
Now, on the Tibetan side, for the artists, we know there is a very vibrant community of artists who are singers and also modern singers and rappers who are playing really a frontline role, who are often playing with the borders of what they can say, not say, and often they pay a high price also. So they are also a victim of harsh repression. You want to add something on this, Wangdue?
Especially the artists, inside Tibet, we have many singers, and the rappers, especially rappers these days, since most of the youth, they are really, really much into rapping and all. That's why, in Tibet also, many of the artists, they really, not clearly, but then in the song, they use the freedom movement's terms, which is really inspiring and motivating. And in Exile, most of the singers, most of the artists, they always try to, put the Tibetan issue and Tibetan cause inside a thing. Yeah, and then at the same time, I really want to add, it would be really great if all the people, especially Kurds, Sami, Tibetan, Taiwanese, and all the artists, of the oppressed people, if they come together and why not organize one, freedom concert?
Oh, what a party.
Yeah, would be really great, which will not only inspire us, but at the same time, it will give a strong message to the whole world. I think that would be really beautiful.
A very good idea. We should say to the Taiwanese ambassador in Stockholm. They have money.
Yeah. We will meet him. So we can put a question. Is there any question from the floor, from the audience?
In every flag book I've seen or read, why isn't the Tibetan flag on the book?
Why? Why isn't? Tibet? National flag. It's here. On the book? Yeah. Flag? She said.
Why is the flag not in school books?
The school books in Tibet. Okay, nice question.
In Tibet or even here, I guess.
Here in your books, in your school here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
anyone want
I
to
can
answer?
begin with the flag question. It's my children also ask me why the Kurdish flag is not there sometime when they go to the school. But normally in Sweden the problem of the flags are not so difficult. So if you many times in the painting they have the flags of Tibet, Kurdistan, and so in the school. But so I don't know exactly. I hope, but the most important thing is that you have the Tibetan flags in your books in Tibet. So, but also in Sweden. But the first question is very easy. You ask a very difficult question about the Russia and Ukraine, and I hope I interpret you now that you will ask what happens. But the most important thing now, 2023, is that to know will Putin be alive? Will Russia be the same Russia? So I cannot make so much analysis before I know, because it's very difficult. But if Russia lose very much, it means also that China lose 50%. I don't know how I can say it much more. So, because then it will be much more safer for Tibet and for Taiwan, for other, and also for the Kurds. Because Turkey and Erdogan will not be alive in June if Putin loses the war. So Putin is now a big problem for everybody because he has been the leader of the evil system in one case. I don't mean that about his personality, but I just say that his position at the moment is because of North Korea, it is Asia, it's Africa, it's China, because Xi Jinping without Putin is not Xi Jinping. It will be something else. So he should learn that it's not normal, and we see that Beijing is very careful.
I think one element maybe also is that the war in Ukraine also highlights the need for our governments and for the EU also to have a much more clear attitude towards authoritarian regime, as China is. So we have seen the solidarity of European countries against Russia and how they support Ukraine, including by military means. And we think that now also China is, in the future, will be the next threat. And there might be a conflict in the future in the region also. So their domestic policies is one part of the coin, and the foreign policy is the other part. So I think now the EU, it's a battle for democracy. It's a battle on values that is going on. And this is not just Europe, but it's go further. So it's an opportunity also for EU and for governments here to see people resisting for their values are as allies, are as potential, interlocutors, partners with whom they should much more discuss, exchange views, cooperate, because we are on the same boat. Tibetans are trying to defend their values, Samis and Kurds also. So it's the situation in Ukraine is I think, changing perception in international relations. This being said, I think we are almost there. It's 7:30. So Matthias, you want to close or say a few remarks? So thank you again for everything.
Well, just a last word. A great thank you for everyone who came here on a normal Wednesday in a wet, cold Stockholm. And as you see, we've been recording this with very professional help, and we'll be putting this online as soon as it's ready. So thank you again.
Bravo. Grazie. Happy birthday.